Hello everyone, my name is Aylin and I'm 16 years old. Has it happened in your life that big trouble had a very unexpected and good outcome? Look through the story to the end and you'll find out how I messed up a best friend with a principal in a not nicest place. I'm still in high school right now, and I have a lovely friend, Monica, who we've been with since elementary school. We were probably the most respected girls at school. We were loved for being brave and our ability to make a good joke when necessary. It is necessary to joke, always. The thing is, Monica and I just loved coming up with different things and doing them around right at school. As a rule, I was the initiator and Monica was always ready to help me. Of course, we never transgressed the law and we tried to ensure that our actions didn't hurt anyone, but only made everyone laugh. However, the principal of the school did not consider it fun, and therefore visits to her became the norm for us. But it only added zeal to us, and after every grueling lecture from the principal, we immediately began to embody new ideas. The story I want to tell you started in preparation for Halloween. Everyone was anticipating this holiday and was busy preparing for it. Monica and I were no exception. I was racking my brain for a long time over which prank to arrange this time, and eventually decided to do something horror movie style so everyone's hair would stand up. Did you try to impress those around you? How did you do that? While I was thinking about how to do this, there was a hearing from school that reached our ears. It turned out that some guys told everyone that we gave up and were no longer able to give out anything interesting or original. Moreover, they declared that this time the cup for the best prank and all views on YouTube would go to them. Hearing this, I was outraged. Who were they to put a spoke in our wheel? I decided to prove to the cheeky little ones that they contacted the wrong ones. And Monica and I were going to get a little prank for these guys. But in the process of preparation, we got caught by a cleaning lady. And of course, despite our pleas, she told the principal everything. The principal read us a lecture, once again, probably already for the umpteenth time, and she gave a few days of working off. I was furious, but not at the principal, but at myself, that we were so stupid, and even more at the guys, because they forced us on this prank with their stupid gossip. We were very unsettled, but we weren't going to give up in any way. At one point, Monica and I were deliberating in the toilet discussing the script for the prank. And suddenly, we heard some giggling behind the wall, which already strained us. Did these scalawags overhear everything? And then there, boom! Someone put trash in the toilet and a bomb! Everything around, including Monica and me, was completely awash with this smelly muck. I wanted to go to the sink, but I saw that there was a large crowd of people coming in the toilet, which blocked the way. Of course, most of them laughed at us, and I heard some of the guys discussing that it looked like Monica and I really gave up. It was a terrible failure along with public humiliation. Besides, we saw in the crowd how those gossipers and liars, Titus and Cooper, who crawled out of a nearby cubicle, laughed too. I wanted to tell them everything I thought about them right now and in front of everyone. But I didn't make it because the principal came, and we realized that we had bigger problems. Once again, we had to listen to the notations from the principal and get a few more days of work. When Monica and I came to school the next day, we realized that our reputation was over. We became the object of ridicule. Toilet girls from that very video. It turned out Titus and Cooper filmed our shame on camera and posted the video to the internet. I wasn't ready to take it and give up. Monica too. I promised a new plan for a prank. Risky, but if everything succeeded, it would be a victory. We would expose those guys as the most real cowards, and it would be very hard for them to clear of the stigma. In order to accomplish my idea, we needed to get to school at night and get everything ready. We had to carry a pumpkin scarecrow into school to get into it the next day and scare the guys. They would sure scream with fear like little girls. We knew there was a small hole in the school gates, place. We got there at night and easily penetrated the grounds of the school. When we climbed the porch, I realized the door was open. Honestly, I got scared going into an empty school, but Monica cheered me up, saying that after the screams of the principal, I had nothing to fear, and we went inside. Have you ever dreamed of sneaking into your school at night? Quite the atmosphere. We went to the dining room and decided to prepare everything there. Our school dining room was a feisty place, the most appropriate for a frightening prank. Monica wanted to go to the bathroom. It was not far from the dining room. She offered me, while she was gone, to set up a camera to capture our triumph over the stupid guys. I stayed alone and set to work. But it got even scarier being alone. I imagined some rustles and even steps, and I, unable to cope with this fear, rushed to catch up with Monica and flew into the toilet like a bullet. I took a flashlight and saw the legs sticking out from the bottom of the cubicle. Monica didn't move or make a sound. I laughed nervously and decided Monica wanted to scare me. I decided not to wait and scare her first. I yanked the cubicle door with force, determined to scare her earlier. But in the cubicle, I saw the principal with her eyes round with fear. She screamed and with trembling hands rushed to close the door from me. Monica resorted to screaming and stared at me and at the door behind which the principal's feet were seen. Monica grabbed my hand and we were out of school. We ran as fast as we could and only a block later stopped to rest. Turned out, I just messed up the toilets with fear and ran into the teacher's room. How stupid. We stood in the middle of the street and silently looked at each other for a while, realizing that we were screwed. The principal would not get it off our hands. She would kick us out of school and we would have big problems with our parents. The next day we came to school, as they say, on wobbly legs. All our thoughts were about one thing: when the principal would call us, and it happened on one of the lessons. The principal spoke surprisingly calm, but her face gave out all her anger. She informed us that she arrived last night because she had received a call from the police telling her that an alarm had gone off at school. Moreover, the same night, someone at school broke a window. Of course, they pinned this broken window on us because there were no other explanations of the situation, and the money that they would take from our parents was very necessary for repairs. Monica and I begged the principal not to say anything to our parents. She answered us nothing and only shook her head. When I came home, without having time to slip into my room, my mother grabbed my hand. I immediately realized she knew everything. My parents just freaked out. I hadn't seen them like that before. They told me that they, together with Monica's parents, had to pay for the repair of the window, in addition to listen to lectures about how poorly educated we were, as well as try very hard to convince the principal not to kick us out of school. Our parents vouched for us, so if we got into conflict again, we would have to look for another school. The next day at school, Titus and Cooper approached us. They said they heard about the situation we got into. We strained and prepared to repel a flurry of gloating on their part. But Titus and Cooper, to our surprise, offered to bury the axe of war and expressed their sympathy, adding that they did not want to get into a similar situation themselves because of the stupid rivalry. So they admitted, a little embarrassed, that in fact, with their gossip and actions, they sought our attention. And they chose such a method to be on par with us, but now they saw that it was reckless and rather stupid. Monica and I were shocked by this confession. We realized things had gone too far and agreed to a reconciliation. As a result, we became friends with them and one friendly company. Kids were still chatting about us at school for a long time, remembering all this situation, but we didn't care about the opinion of our classmates. All this helped me understand that it's time to stop bullying and chase the reputation of the notorious prankers, because if you constantly fixate on the opinion of others, you can lose yourself and do stupid things. Although, periodically, we kept joking and playing each other out, but so as to not bring concerns to others. I hope you enjoyed my story. If so, don't forget to put a like and subscribe to the channel. There are new, interesting stories on it all the time, and you can click the bell icon to see them first. I wish you well, and I hope all your enemies become your friends.
Hi, my name is Emily, and my mom and dad just got divorced. How would you feel if an innocent person died giving their life for you? It all started with a rabbit. No, not this rabbit, the other one. It must have been a sign. You know, I lived with my mom and grandma after my parents' divorce, and I miss my dad a lot. But my mom had such a big fight with him that they can't even talk peacefully. Every time they meet, it turns into a terrible scandal, and I never know which side to take. At least Grandma doesn't get involved in these fights, but it doesn't help. I know that my parents are not happy together, and I don't want them to get back together and ruin their lives, but it would be nice to live without scandals. I rarely see my dad, and I take comfort in his photos and gifts, and then one day his gift, a stuffed rabbit, is completely destroyed. It turned out that while I was walking, a neighbor came with a dog. The dog wandered into my room and savagely killed baby Frankie. My grandmother was terribly upset because it was she who didn't protect my pet. It wasn't even the toy itself, but it was just my father's last gift before the divorce. He used to call me his little bunny. It was our joke. I was so shattered by this. Did people dear to you give you gifts? Did you save them? And if you lost or ruined such a gift, what would you feel? Grandma promised to wash and sew up the rabbit, and I was happy to give it to her. A couple of weeks later, I asked my grandmother how my toy was doing. Grandma threw up her hands, and she completely forgot why she took the rabbit and had already thrown away those dirty rags. I burst into tears so much that my mother came to the noise. Of course, she was surprised that I was so hysterical about the toy. She tried to comfort me and said that she would buy me a new toy, a big bear that would be cooler than Dad's gift. My mother didn't understand why I cared for this rabbit so much, and we had a terrible quarrel. I had no one to complain to but my dad. I called him and started crying right into the phone, and my dad calmed me down and promised to make me happy. To be honest, I already cried enough that I didn't care if I had more or less toys. Oh, but I shouldn't have underestimated Dad. The next day, a courier arrived and brought a box with holes for air. Guess what was in it? A real white rabbit! My mother and grandmother were strongly against an animal in the house, but I was able to convince them that the pet would live in my room. After all, Grandma kept chickens in the yard, and the rabbit is much less of a problem. My mother gave up, but went to work very dissatisfied. Then my grandmother called me to the kitchen for a serious conversation. She said that my mother was going to give me a purebred kitten, that she had already chosen it at the shelter, that my mother was heartbroken that my dad had tricked her with a gift again. She tried to convince me to return the rabbit to the pet store and enjoy the kitten, but I refused. I wouldn't give my father's gift for anything in the world. I really wanted to call my dad and say thanks, but my mother forbade me to talk to him like that. He showered me with gifts after every call, and he would spoil me. It hurt, by the way, but then I talked to my grandmother and calmed down a little. When we went for a walk together, she explained to me that my mother cared so much because she saw that my father repaid in gifts and did not want to spend time with me in general. He was not interested in me. I didn't believe her at first, but before I went to bed, I thought about what she said, and indeed, my father has always spent little time with me and gave me a lot of gifts. But what good were these gifts? Dolls were broken, dresses are torn, toys are lost, sweets were spoiled. Or Grandma and Mom gave me something cooler, and I myself lost Dad's gifts. But it was different with the rabbit. The rabbit was living proof that Dad loved me. Until the end of the holidays, I did not leave the rabbit for a second. But then, school days began. I was spending time with friends again, walking a lot, playing sports and studying, and I didn't hurry home anymore, even knowing that my favorite rabbit was waiting for me there. I got used to it, just like I'd gotten used to any other gift. And yet, it was alive, and it was my friend. So when I came home one day and found the empty cage, I was terrified. My mother was not at home, so I rushed to ask grandmother where my favorite pet had gone. My grandmother burst into tears, and I immediately felt cold, foreboding something terrible. And I was right. My grandmother explained through tears that she had confused a rabbit and a chicken without her glasses and cooked a meat pie with it. I was choking with hatred for her, but she begged me not to tell my mother about it, so as not to upset her. So I had to agree. My mother tried very hard to console me a little, promising me the most beautiful kitten in the world. How do you think a kitten could replace my dead friend? In desperation and tears, I called my dad after everyone went to bed to complain about my grandmother. Guess what he told me? It turned out that my grandmother told him that I hated him, that I didn't want to hear about him, and demanded the rabbit itself be turned into cutlets because I hated it too. You see, I didn't like it. I said goodbye quickly because I had a lot to think about. It sounded crazy, but judge for yourself. My toys were lost and broken. My grandmother threw out the toy hare and killed a rabbit while lying to my father, whom I was forbidden to call at all. In the morning, I quietly told my mother about it, and she was really furious. She shouted that my father was deliberately turning me against my grandmother, that he should be forbidden to take me on vacation, and many other unpleasant things. I realized that it was useless to argue with her and cheat against my grandmother. Then I pretended to think about my behavior and be ashamed. On Monday, I took a bag of things with me instead of my school bag and went to my dad's house. Dad felt sorry for me and promised to sort it out. We had dinner together and he told me to stay the night and prepare my room. I settled into bed for the first time since the rabbit's death. I was able to relax. To think of all the plots that had been built around me all this time, it was a good thing. I had a dad who would never do this. In my sleep, I heard my dad calling someone. I didn't notice it at first, but then it sounded almost like my mom and dad fighting before the divorce. And like then, the noise was now keeping me awake. I crept to the door and listened. Mom and dad were yelling at each other over the phone. My dad viciously promised to my mother to hire lawyers and sue for custody from me. He threatened to sue her. I didn't want them to fight and share me again. So I threw myself at them in a real tantrum and made a scene of myself. I begged, I screamed, I threatened to run away from home and let no one get me. Dad somehow calmed me down and put me to bed. And in the morning, I heard the doorbell rang. Mom was here, and I threw my arms around her like a little girl. My mother gave her version of events. My grandmother told her that the rabbit had to be put down for safety reasons, because it was sick with something. Dad was surprised to hear that he had allegedly said a lot of nasty things to her. He called us at home many times. My grandmother answered the phone, and he asked her to tell us that mutual friends were calling my mother to spend time with her, or that the lawyers were asking to arrange a face-to-face meeting and resolve the issue of dividing the property. I wonder how my grandmother's retelling it turned into, "I hate this stupid bitch, and I will take away all her money and the child." It took only the three of us a few minutes to realize that Grandma was fighting with my parents on purpose. My mother decided that we would not return to my grandmother again, so as not to fall under her influence. My father suggested that she stay in the new apartment, but my mother refused. Then Dad promised her that he would help her find a new place to live. and pick up things from my grandmother's house. I was just happy that my parents were finally communicating without shouting, and in memory of the rabbit who died, but its death opened our eyes, we decided to buy a dog together, and I'll call it Rob. Be sure to stay on our channel, put your likes, and click the bell icon to not miss anything.
Hi, my name is Donna. I'm 17 years old, and I was the most popular girl in my class. Would you be upset if the whole school saw photos of you completely naked? Sounds complicated, right? If you watch the video to the end, you will find out how I coped with the situation and how I managed to find myself in it. I love being photographed. I imagine myself a famous actress in character. My ex-boyfriend always laughed about it. He said I didn't look like an actress, but like a monkey. But that's not the only reason we broke up. It was much worse. And it's a good thing we don't cross paths at school. I don't want to hear about him, let alone see him. When we broke up, my best friend Brenda was very supportive. At first, and then she stopped. We suddenly started communicating as if we weren't friends, just classmates. Hi, bye, bye. We stopped walking together after school, going to the mall, and going to the movies. I couldn't figure out what it was. But suddenly she wrote to me and invited me to visit her. We hadn't taken pictures together for a long time. She missed it. I was so happy. It's really been a long time since we had fun together. When I arrived, Brenda said that she had come up with a great idea for a photo shoot. She picked up everything so that I could repeat scenes from movies, in similar costumes with the same makeup, in the same poses as the actresses. Of course I agreed. Do you like to arrange photo shoots like real models? It was fun at first. Brenda was showing the images on her tablet and I was depicted in them. I made a great Wonder Woman, a good Hermione, and a terrible Maleficent. But then the footage became more and more strange, indecent. I said that I was ashamed, but Brenda laughed, saying that it was a great idea, let's have fun, and then delete it. Anyway, I was shooting, and completely naked, and, well, in every way. And the next day at school, my ex-boyfriend Steve came up to me and showed me these photos. I wanted to kill him on the spot, but I stood there like a post. Steve said that I would do whatever he told me to do now, or else he would put the photos on the school network. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there until he left. When I came to my senses, I ran to Brenda to ask where Steve got my photos. And Brenda laughed and said she gave them to him, and that she had been Steve's girlfriend for a month. And I was a fool to leave a guy like that. That's for sure. I felt like a fool to be friends with such a creature. I didn't know who to ask for help. My parents? But they would shout that it was my fault if I was being photographed naked. The teachers? Then someone would find out that I had such photos, and the word would go all over school. I wouldn't wash myself from this until graduation. Anyway, I didn't tell anyone about it. I hoped that he would scare me and forget. We parted with a terrible scandal, but did he hate me enough to completely ruin my life? For 2 weeks, Steve didn't show up. I began to calm down. Maybe everything would go well. The bitch Brenda tried to talk to me, but I sent her away. At the same time, I made a very good presentation about plastic waste in the ocean. The teacher praised me and then suggested that I repeat it for the whole school at the science festival. He said it would be a good line on my college resume. I was very happy. I buried my head in sites about ocean pollution. I didn't care about those two assholes, Brenda and her Stevie. On the eve of the presentation, I received a message from him. He very rudely ordered me to go to his house to have sex. I was angry, of course, and I said no, and turned off the phone. And then I got really scared. What would he do next? Would he carry out his threats? I turned off my phone, but I still didn't sleep all night. I imagined all sorts of horrors. That he would print out these photos and put them up all over the school like posters, or that he would make leaflets out of them and distribute them to everyone. There was nothing like this at school this morning, but I met Steve almost immediately. He didn't come close, but as I passed, he said, "You made your choice." My hands were shaking and tears were pouring from my eyes. I stood there again, not knowing what to do. One option was worse than the other. Everyone would find out anyway. For 10 minutes, I gathered the courage to either call my mother and ask for advice or go to the principal. I didn't know what was worse. While I was tossing around, it was time to go perform. I gathered all my strength and told about the pollution of the ocean. They listened to me carefully and asked me questions. I think I did a good job with the presentation. It was great. I got carried away pretty quickly and forgot about Steve for a while. And suddenly, on the last slide, instead of a poster with a call to save the ocean, there was that very photo of me, the most vulgar and terrible of all. I ran without looking around. I wanted to be as far away as possible in Australia or Siberia as long as I wasn't at school. Where would you go if you felt there was no more room for you in the world? When I got home, I said that I wasn't going to school anymore. Never in my life. My parents didn't even ask me what was wrong, but started talking to me about the benefits of education and all that. I locked myself in my room and decided not to go out until I was old. I didn't know what to do. I was mad at Steve, at Brenda, and most of all, at myself. I erased all my photos, but it didn't seem enough. I smashed my phone against the wall and for a long time stamped on it with my heel. My parents were knocking on the door, saying something, but I didn't hear them. Then they fell behind. I didn't know how much time had passed. Maybe an hour, maybe a year. I lay there and stared blankly at the wall. It felt like my life was over. There was another knock on the door. I opened it to tell my parents to back off. But they weren't my parents. Brenda the traitor stood on the threshold. I screamed. I wanted to hit her, scratch her with my nails, bite her, but I didn't have the strength. Why was she here? To see how my life was trampled on? To gloat? I screamed in her face that she made a complete wreck of my life, and then my strength went somewhere, and I quietly asked why she did this to me. Brenda said that Steve made her do it. Yeah, 3 times. She probably wanted to please her Stevie. And Brenda started telling me. When Steve and I broke up, he immediately hit on Brenda. At first, she liked that she had taken the tough guy away from me, but then Steve started acting like a jerk, as if I didn't know what he was like. She wanted to send him away, but he said that he would tell everyone that she was a whore and all sorts of nasty things. It sounded childish, but Brenda's parents were very strict. They didn't let her go out with guys, and if they heard something like that, she was not going to be happy with it. So Brenda was afraid to resist Steve. She became his thing, his servant. She did everything he said. He made her set me up too. My stomach turned over. That thing Steve was torturing my friend. And I didn't even notice it until it came to me. And then Brenda started asking me for help. Steve was demanding more and more of her. Brenda said I was very brave if I had the guts not to go along with Steve. Was I the brave one? I was afraid to leave the house now. The whole town was probably talking about me. Brenda said no. After my presentation, our biology teacher came out and started talking about the problem of ocean pollution as if nothing had happened, and that someone who had tried to disrupt the presentation did the same thing as someone who threw garbage in the ocean, that the ocean was defenseless, like a man before a bully, and it was as easy to kill him as to spoil the performance with a ridiculous trick, and no one laughed at my misfortune. Everyone was worried about me, but the teacher said I needed some time alone. So when I go back to school, everything will be fine, even without a reprimand. I told Brenda we should tell the whole school about Steve, because otherwise he would continue to use other people. When we told the principal that we wanted to speak, he supported us. He said that what Steve was doing was called blackmail, and it was a real crime. And Brenda and I told the whole school how Steve had humiliated us. how we'd become enemies because of him, and how it all came out later. I was very scared and ashamed, but I saw how carefully I was being listened to, how a girl began to cry. This meant that my speech was necessary and useful, and I was happy if I could help someone. These things don't just happen at our school, so I wrote the story here. If you want to help those who are being blackmailed, give us a like so they can see this video. Subscribe to our channel and you will hear many more cool stories. Good luck and strength to you so you can overcome any troubles.
Hi, my name is Gina. I'm 17. Do you believe in karma? What would you feel if karma made you shit yourself in a pool? Watch the video to the end to find out what a bitch karma can be. I live in a small town where everyone knows each other. I have a group of friends since elementary school, and there was a guy in this group, Danny, that I liked. But I still didn't dare to tell him how I feel. I tried to hint to him many times, but he never understood what I was getting at. I made a clear decision that I would tell Danny during the upcoming summer vacation, and come what it may. But then something unexpected happened. I heard a rumor that Danny started going out with another girl. How could I have missed my moment? He was seduced by someone else. I decided to follow Danny when he started snapping after the phone call. I followed him to the park and saw him dating some girl. Boyfriend snatcher, I thought. I won't let you steal my boyfriend. Have you ever been so desperate that you did very odd things in the name of love, like me? If you surpass what I did next, then be sure to write in the comments what you did. I followed them out to the amusement park. This was my chance to embarrass her in front of Danny. There was a lot of people. I put on a hood and approached my couple. Then I jerked down the girl's skirt, exposing her underpants, and quickly mingled with the crowd. I heard a child cry out behind me, "Mommy, look! A girl in her underpants!" The crowd nearby immediately began to giggle and hoot. When I moved away, I saw my couple running away from there. Imagine my surprise when the next day Danny went to meet his girlfriend again. I developed a sophisticated plan of action. God, I was ecstatic with myself after this. I decided to go much closer. After visiting several dating sites, I found a guy who was interested in me. I made a date for him at the water park. Then I called Danny and told him that I'd met an interesting guy and he asked me out, but I was afraid to go alone. I asked Danny to go on a double date with me and asked if he had anyone to go with. He said that there was a girl and he would support me. Great! The next day we were standing at the door of the water park. Danny introduced us to his girlfriend, Tina. After that, we immediately went to change our clothes. When Tina took off her t-shirt, I realized that I was losing out to her in breast size. As soon as she went to the shower, I took out the scissors I had prepared earlier. I had a lot of tricks up my sleeve that day. The preparation was not in vain. After getting out of the shower, Tina began to put on a swimsuit, but unfortunately, it was torn. What a misfortune. Tina sighed and there was nothing left for her to do but leave. But she put on her t-shirt and said it looked like she won't be swimming today. But that shouldn't interfere with our entertainment. Hell, she's a tough nut to crack. We came out of the locker room. The guys were waiting for us. They were obviously disappointed that Tina wasn't going to swim with us. But now I looked much more attractive in my swimsuit. 1 point for me. We went to the water slides. I thought we could be alone, Danny and I. But as soon as Danny moved out, he immediately went to Tina. I should do something. I saw several boys about 10 years old playing with water pistols. I went up to them and promised to pay them if they sprinkle water on Tina's t-shirt. They liked the idea and started their hunt. Waiting for the moment, they ran up to Tina and started splashing onto her white t-shirt. I thought it would start to shine through, but Tina just laughed. She scooped up water from the pool and began to respond to the boys in the same way. Then I saw the bra under her t-shirt. After that, Tina said that she would go to the bathroom to wring out her t-shirt and come back to us. We went to the food court. I volunteered to bring drinks. I took the drinks and got last chance to ruin this couple's date. I took my secret weapon with me. Laxatives. I moved a little to the side and poured the powder into Tina's glass and was about to go to our table when suddenly Michael's hand landed on my shoulder. He asked me what I was doing. I had nothing to say. He said he had figured it out. I had a crush on Danny and was just using him. And now I had added something else to the cocktail. I told him that it was true and he could walk away whenever he liked. Michael said that he would go away and leave me alone, but only if I drank that cocktail that I had put something in. Otherwise, he would tell Danny everything. Apparently, I was at a stalemate. I couldn't let him tell Danny everything. We were back in our seats when Tina arrived. I arranged drinks for everyone, keeping a glass with laxative for myself. Michael gave me a look that told me to drink every drop. I couldn't think of a way to deceive Michael, and I was too ashamed to even imagine that Danny would find out what I'd come to in my attempts to win him over. What would you do if you were me? I emptied the glass in no time and felt nothing. Maybe this medicine was not working. I guess this was the case, so I needed a different plan. Danny said that we should go have fun in a pool because Tina found a store here with swimsuits. We went to the pool. There, we started playing ball, and then I felt a sudden urge. Damn it, I was really sick. I realized I couldn't move. Any movement, and I would have taken a dump right in the pool. With each passing second, the tension in my stomach increased. I clenched my teeth and tensed my entire body. It seemed like water around me began to boil. Smoothly, gradually, step by step, I had to get away with it. Just get out of the pool. But suddenly, the ball flew in my direction. Michael tried to fend it off and hit me in the stomach with his elbow. I couldn't help it. A cloud of brown floated up around me. I couldn't move. I was terrified. One of the children shouted from the edge of the pool, "Look! Look! The girl took a dump!" Everyone was looking at me. It was like the whole world stopped and stared at me. I stopped feeling my legs, which began to drag me down like a rock. I didn't resist. Maybe I should just stay here and drown. Maybe I would just float upside down. Somebody help me! I don't want to end up in this shit! Please, save me! And then, someone decided to save me, pulling my hair. Danny! He wouldn't leave me here. It was him. But when I opened my eyes, I saw Tina. We got out of the pool in a daze, and she dragged me with her to the locker room. There, she helped me take a shower and change. She said it didn't look like Michael would be too happy about this first date. And her cousin seemed to be in shock too. Stop. What cousin? Tina replied that Danny was her cousin, whom she was visiting on vacation. So, they were related? Oh my God. I started crying even more. Tina calmed me down and asked if I had something to cover my face with. I pulled out my hoodie. From the look in Tina's eyes at that moment, I knew she recognized it, but she just said nothing. When we came out of the water park, we met Danny, and he couldn't look me in the face. I started to cry again. Tina asked, "Where's Michael?" Danny muttered that he had left. Then Tina raised her voice at Danny. She said, "How could he ignore her and drag her around when she was so sick? If she hadn't been with us all this time, he wouldn't have noticed that she wasn't feeling well." Danny was stunned by this statement. He looked me in the eyes for the first time and asked, "Did you really feel that bad all this time?" I nodded at him with tears in my eyes. Danny hugged me and apologized. Apparently, he really believed that he was to blame for everything that happened. At his cousin's suggestion, Danny invited me to the movies as soon as I was feeling better to apologize for my mistake. Tina added that her cousin should behave like a knight and that it was a date. Danny hesitated and said, "Yeah, a date. Will you go with me?" That's how, my friends, I achieved my goal. Even though at some point everything went wrong, Danny and I have been dating for a couple of months. I probably won't be celebrating the anniversary of our relationship next year. The memories are, let's say, a little blurry. Put a like if now you understand that karma really exists. Subscribe so that you don't miss new videos and don't the same accidents happen.
Hello everyone, I'm Sandra, and I'm 19 years old. Have people ever fallen in love with you, but you didn't like them back? This is terrible, and it's especially disgusting when the rejected lover then begins to take revenge, and you can't do anything about it. Watch my video till the end, and you'll find out how my family almost got kicked out of the house, and I almost got kicked out of university because of one stupid joke. Some things you should know about me is that I'm a timid girl. I am a psych major. My parents are incredible Scrooges who count every single cent. And I have a friend, Laurie, who is a crazy party girl, and she wants to drag me to work at a children's camp. Actually, it was a good idea because I needed money to pay my parents back for the tuition fee. But there was a problem. I had to get a recommendation from Professor Antonin, who was... how do I explain him? Firstly, he has a bad temper. Secondly, he hates my group because they once did a parody of him at Halloween. And on top of that, I only have 2 weeks to do it, because then it'll be too late and I won't be taken to the camp. You can do whatever you want with it, Sandra. Besides, you know what? We were late for his last class. I wouldn't be late if I was alone, but Laurie put off the practice assignment until the last day, then called me for help, and we ended up spending all night on it. And of course, we overslept. Professor Antonin refused to let us in and marked us both absent. Have you ever been unfairly punished by your teachers? I think everyone has had this experience, but I was mad at Laurie. Why didn't she just do the task on time? She said she could solve the problem, and after class, she entered his office. I hoped that Laurie would succeed. She was beautiful and charming, and male teachers loved her, but no, she was thrown out, and he even threatened not to accept our tasks at all. Here's a good question. What should we do now? Suddenly, Laurie nudged me and said the craziest thing, like, "Hey Sandra, did you notice the way he was looking at you?" I mean, yes, Laurie, I saw the way he looked at me, like the embodiment of pure evil at an innocent lamb. No, you don't understand. He's totally into you. What? It was impossible, of course. Laurie understood people more than I did, but Professor Antonin into me? No. Laurie tried to convince me that everything was alright and that it would work in our favor because I could meet him in a cafe, talk to him, charm him, and then he would let up and do whatever I wanted. I tried to prove to Laurie that it was a bad idea. But then my supervisor from the camp administration called me and asked how I was doing. He was obviously very nervous and said that I should hurry up. Your groupmates have already... Gosh, didn't they all realize how complicated it was? But it seemed like I had to be part of Laurie's plan and try to flirt with my professor. Everything in this sentence sounds wrong, but I didn't have a choice. Did I? Laurie and I secretly followed Antonin and found out the following. First of all, he ate lunch and dinner alone, so we wouldn't have any suspicious witnesses. Secondly, he went to the same cafe with delicious and cheap bread. Thirdly, he looked confused and lyrical when he was alone. Did he really fall in love with me? Anyways, we were able to think over our plan carefully, and in my spare time, my parents came from the suburbs to visit me. I dressed up nicely and took them to my favorite restaurant. My mom and dad were pretty confused and couldn't talk. But then Dad finally gave out that their money was gone, and they barely had managed to find money for my tuition fee. I was confused. I didn't know that my parents were so bad with money. Gosh, maybe they need my help. But I'm going to work in a children's camp. This should definitely help us. I gave them a tight smile, hugged them, and said it was okay and that I got a job. Of course, it was only for the summer, but it's still some income. My mother burst into tears and my father took my hand and said that I was doing a great job and they were very proud of me. I was very touched and I hugged my dad back again, but now I couldn't get out of this situation. I have to get this job. And before that, a recommendation from Professor Antonin. So, putting on fancy makeup, the most elegant dress, the timid Sandra went hunting for other people's hearts. Have you ever seduced a man? Or boys? Well, I've never attracted anyone's attention. To be honest, I had no idea how to do it. Probably I need to laugh or smile more often. I don't know. I came to Professor Antonin's favorite cafe, took the most profitable table, and started looking out the window romantically. I was lucky that this place was unpopular. I was given only 1 cup of coffee, and I knew exactly who it was from. I elegantly sat down at Professor Antonin's table. He was even cute. I've never thought of him like this until this point. We started talking, I flirted with him unequivocally, and then when I started talking about my studies, he looked at me for a few moments, and then asked, "Miss Ellis?" I didn't expect him to sound that surprised. He wasn't happy. It was as if the earth had fallen from under his feet. I couldn't lie to him, and I didn't want to. So I told him I was Sandra Ellis. He paused, got up, coldly said, "Nice try," and left. It was a disaster. I didn't expect him to be that offended. Gosh, what was I supposed to do? I couldn't sleep the whole night. Then, the next day, I was called to the dean's office and informed of Professor Antonin's complaint about my misconduct. And now I was going to be expelled. I couldn't say anything in my defense. I burst out crying and went to Laurie. She was smart, so she could definitely help me, but she didn't want to do it. I heard the words that I didn't expect to get from my friend. She said it was my fault. I should have been more careful. She couldn't risk her reputation. I thought that Laurie would turn me down, but not that she would betray me. She hadn't even apologized for making a mistake in her observations. Crushed and destroyed, I decided to take the last chance to ask my parents for help. I told them about my problems at the university, and they rushed to my rescue, like a real loving father and mother. I was a little pleased with their decision, but only a little. The fact was that I kept silent about the attempt to seduce Professor Antonin. Yeah, this was an important thing, but I knew that they would only judge me, and rightly so. I just couldn't tell them. It would destroy me. But there was one more thing. I knew that they would have to mortgage our house to save me, and I knew that our family had no more money, and I wouldn't be able to pay them back for the tuition or my salvation. My dad decided to talk to the dean about this situation, but I was afraid he could find out the truth. So I tried to stop him, but he didn't listen to me and wanted to defend me. Then I rushed to the university using another road. I had to get to the dean's office before my dad, but I was late. I got in a traffic jam, so I left my car and ran. When I got to the university, I saw Dad standing next to Professor Antonin, who was handing him an exclusion document, my document. When Professor Antonin saw me, he grunted and asked, "Are you using all the possible ways to stay here?" I didn't reply. He turned on his heels and left. My dad asked me what had even happened, and I still couldn't tell him the truth. That's it. I was kicked out of the university. Of course, I could get restrained, but who would restore my reputation? Where would I get the money for it? Where would I go to work without a higher education? Be a cleaner? Great. This was what I dreamed of after school. I packed up all my things and finally decided to go to Professor Antonin, just to tell him how he destroyed my life. I touched the office door, but I heard Laurie's voice. So weird. Didn't she get her recommendation? I stopped at the door and heard something that left me speechless. Now, Laurie was sitting in front of Professor Antonin, crying and whining that she couldn't pay for tuition and was asking him for a recommendation for the camp. What nonsense! I knew she was rich. Oh, God, she just took my story and now she was trying to soften the teacher. I didn't put up with it. I burst into the office and said sharply, "Listen to me." And I told him everything I knew. How Laurie had encouraged me to seduce him, how she was now lying right in front of the teacher's face, and how ashamed I was for getting involved in this. Laurie tried to shut me up. I thought she could, but Professor Antonin told her to shut up. He listened to me and said, "Okay, I now understand." I didn't think it would work out. Professor Antonin withdrew his statement and apologized to me. My parents didn't have to mortgage the house. And even more than that, I received a long-awaited positive recommendation from the professor. And now I can go to the summer camp and help my parents get out of the financial hole a little bit. Subscribe to our channel. Send us your interesting life stories. Put likes and reposts on our videos. And thank you so much for your attention. Bye!